Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to the classic Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. We are in passage number 2. Now the assumptions here are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down the left-hand side, Talks with Walt, the title of our playlist, and that you've been with us from the very beginning, starting with inscriptions all the way up and including an introductory set of comments regarding Ferry, as well as passage number 1. Now, for background information, I want to go back to a passage that we were messing with in the last lecture from Song of Myself, passage 4. We've given full lectures already on this set of lines, but I just want you to hear the echoes as we get ready now for passage number 2. Whitman will say it this way. I'll back up. These come to me days and nights and go from me again, but they are not the me myself. Apart from the pulling and hauling stands what I am, stands amused, complacent, compassionating, idle, unitary, looks down, is erect, or bends an arm on an impalpable certain rest, looking with sideway curved head, curious what will come next, both in and out of the game, and watching and wondering at it. Backward I see in my own days where I sweated through fog with linguists and contenders. I have no mockings or arguments. I witness and wait. Let's now turn to passage 2 and hear already some of those echoes. The impalpable sustenance of me from all things at all hours of the day. The simple, compact, well-joined scheme. Myself disintegrated, everyone disintegrated, yet part of the scheme. The similitudes of the past and those of the future, the glories strung like beads on my smallest sights and hearings, on the walk in the street and the passage over the river. The current rushing so swiftly and swimming with me far away. The others that are to follow me. The ties between me and them. The certainty of others. The life, love, sight, hearing of others. Others will enter the gates of the ferry and cross from shore to shore. Others will watch the run of the flood tide. Others will see the shipping of Manhattan north and west, and the heights of Brooklyn to the south and east. Others will see the islands large and small. 50 years hence, others will see them as they cross. The sun half an hour high. 100 years hence, or ever so many 100 years hence, others will see them, will enjoy the sunset, the pouring in of the flood tide, the falling back to the sea of the ebb tide. Now, when we turn right away, this word impalpable, in such a fascinating word, tentative we might say, right? Sustenance, go back to the Song of the Open Road, passage 13, where he uses that word. The impalpable sustenance of me from all things at all hours of the day. This idea that there's always this constant movement. We're going to finish with the way in which the water comes in, the water goes out. We have to think, of course, of our reading of Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching and the ideas of the yin-yang symbol and Taoism itself. The simple, he loves that word, doesn't he? Compact, he loves that word because that's what a seed is, right? It's simple, it's compact, and yet the potentiality is always there. Well-joined scheme. This idea of the scheme or the pattern is foundational to our reading, of course, of Leaves of Grass, as well as obviously this poem. It'll get repeated. Myself disintegrated, the only use in all of Leaves of Grass. We love to point out those words where they only get used one time. Disintegrated, everyone disintegrated, the only time again that it gets used. He says, well-joined scheme. Myself disintegrated, everyone disintegrated, yet part of the scheme. Everything is a part of the pattern. The idea of the matrix here is central to our reading of Leaves of Grass. Everything is interconnected. We're all part of something. And we will quote later, as we think about it at 3a, Tennyson's Ulysses, I am a part of all that I have met. The similitudes, this idea that the new is the new, as we have said, the NEW is the KNEW. The similitudes of the past and those of the future. Everything is somehow connected in that regards. And the idea of circles will be central to our reading of this poem in the same way that we made comments at learnstrong.net earlier when we gave lectures on Emerson's famous essay Circles. The glories strung like beads. This is a beautiful kind of image, right, of putting beads on a string, a famous religious symbol as well. The glories strung like beads. on my smallest sights and hearings. The minute we see this idea of smallest, we think about Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, Coleridge's classic, and the idea that there is nothing that's insignificant, even though it is small. The smallest sights and hearings on the walk in the street, Whitman, a great walker, and as we pointed out in our song of the Open Road, in the street, and the passage over the river, that idea of the passage or the journey, central to our understanding of our reading of the Odyssey. The current rushing so swiftly and swimming with me far away. In other words, current for Whitman in this poem will be a symbol that we want to come back to again and again. And then the next line, the others that are to follow me. The ties, this idea that we're somehow all connected to each other, between me and them. The certainty of others, and then he'll give us, a list here. The life, love, sight, hearing of others. That is to say, Whitman is going to remind all of us how we're all interconnected in beautiful ways. And the imagery of the river and the currents of the river are a reminder of that, because why? All rivers, of course, as we'll say at the end here, run to the sea. Then there's a break, and then after those seven, that anaphora as we have pointed it out. Now we're going to get four others. Others will enter the gates of the ferry and cross from shore to shore. This idea of crossing, again, takes us back to passage 1. Others will watch the run of the flood tide. Of course, flood tide, the first word of our poem. Others will see the shipping of Manhattan north and west, and the heights of Brooklyn to the south and the east. Think about it. Whitman, of course, is working with a poem here in 1856 when there isn't all of the building and construction that, of course, today we see when we are there in Brooklyn. You could still see actual hills. You could still see a new territory that had not been completely I was going to say cultivated. Some have said destroyed, right? Notice he continues, others will see the islands, large and small. In other words, standing there looking, as Whitman was doing, he says there will be people ages hence, as he'll say it, that will see the exact same sights. And then he says it, 50 years hence, which would put it at 1906, others will see them as they cross, back to the crossing, the sun half an hour high. 100 years hence would make it 1956, or ever so many hundred years. I mean, think about it, 2056 makes it 200 years since, right? Others will see them. In other words, the things we're looking at are repeated in some way. They will enjoy, just to finish now, the sunset. You'll remember from Song of Myself, passage 35, he uses this word enjoy to talk about picnics and baseball, right? We'll enjoy the sunset, the pouring in, notice it's a hyphenated phrase, of the flood tide, the falling back, notice all these hyphenated phrases, to the sea of the ebb tide. Now this ebb tide we're going to see several times out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking and elsewhere as well. This notion of there's always this cyclical nature of the way that life is lived in real time. Let's finish at 2a. What are some of the major themes and messages here? Well, the artist always reminds us that we are never alone. There's always another generation coming. And it's all about legacy to that degree, right? To try to understand that the actions that we commit today have some kind of ripple, can we use that phrase now that that word picture is central to the reading of Brooklyn Ferry, has some kind of ripple effect, and it's all somehow interconnected. The matrix, as we said. At 2b, not what said, but how it said, the repetition, 7 these, the 4 others, as we pointed out. At 3, I mentioned Tennyson's Ulysses. I think Tennyson stands behind, and the poetry of Tennyson stands in large measure behind a whole lot of the program, if I can use that phrase, of Brooklyn Ferry. And I think from Ulysses, that line, I am part of all that I have met. Yet all experience is an arch where through gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. In other words, what is it that the old Ulysses, we've given full lecture at learnstrong.net on this, but what is it that the old Ulysses is about to do? Well, he's going down to take his last journey. There lies the port. The vessel puffs her sails. There gloom the dark broad seas. And then he'll call to his mariners, that is to say others. And so you have this sense for Whitman that you're playing a very similar kind of game. I'm part of all that I have met. Finally, at 3b, just to help you own a brief passage like this, can you imagine the world in 100 or 200 years from this moment? What do you imagine it will be like? And then what actions, what legacy will you specifically leave so that there is some sense of it? For example, my seniors are always exhorted at the end of their senior year to write a letter to themselves, and it won't be open until they turn 50. It's a letter they write where they tell about who and what they are right now and the experiences that they're having. And then they seal that letter, and on the outside of the letter, they have to write the date when they turn 50. It freaks a lot of my seniors out to actually write that date down, and then they're like, whoa. Of course, for the students that I've already taught who are opening these letters, they will often say, I can't even remember writing the letter, but how fascinating is it for me to look back and to see what I once was. Of course, those letters, if they can somehow stay in existence, will be fascinating reads for great-great-grandchildren way into the future. What are you leaving for those to come after you? And finally, just a simple question, do you enjoy sunsets? And when was the last time that you just went out to enjoy a sunset, as Whitman will exhort us here? I hope that your reading of Leaves of Grass is one more thing that you enjoy. Thank you.